I'm James, I'm an alcoholic. Thank you so much for the meeting and for sharing, Angus, and the opportunity to share. I just want to start off by saying that I haven't put much thought into this. Over the last week, kind of been preoccupied with, obviously, the event that happened yesterday, which I suppose has been a blessing in disguise, because often just getting straight into it and sharing straight experience is obviously best. I'm also not feeling great today. I had a very interesting night last night. I ended up going to sleep at about 3 in the morning. I couldn't manage to fall asleep, and so I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling, and I'm starting to get sick too. My sinuses are burning, and I'm staring at the ceiling, and I'm getting resentful at all sorts of things, the ticking clock on the wall, and the light coming from the aircon, and the noises and cracks in the wall. And I thought, well, this is kind of familiar. Kind of reminds me of using days. But then another really interesting thought popped into my mind, is like, why can't you sleep? And the reason why I couldn't sleep is because yesterday was full. It was a full-on day. We had Bruno's memorial, which was obviously very emotional and lots of stuff going on. And then I had the rest of the afternoon and into the evening with my very close friends, and what I realized is, and this is quite amazing that I can have this realization, it's something that the program gives me, is how sensitive I am to external stimulus. All of that stuff happening around me is going on in my head, and I can't sleep. And I thought to myself, wow, there it is. There's my physical alcoholism, Whereas before, obviously, drugs and alcohol did that, but I am sensitive to stuff. I'm sensitive to things outside of me. And I just thought that was quite interesting. Anyway, don't want to harp on about that too much. As I said, I haven't put much prep into this, but I've been thinking about wanting to talk more about God and kind of break down the last 3 years, because I feel that each year has kind of meant something different. And I also don't really want to spend too much time on the war stories in the background either. But I will just put this out there, I don't come from a broken home, I don't come from any major trauma, I don't come from any hardships. In fact, I come from quite a lot of privilege. My parents are both very hardworking, kind people, and I don't have any real excuse to have ended up where I ended up and to have gone through and put my family and everyone around me through what I did. But I will say that my drinking became messy. Is the right word to use, messy, around probably age 22, 23. So just after university, I started a job in an advertising firm, and I moved from Durban down to Cape Town to do my 3rd year of varsity, and then I sealed an internship in that year, and I started working straight out of varsity for this big advertising firm. And I think with that kind of freedom came, a lot of options. I could choose to do, I did what I liked. And my drinking and using started to become messy then. It started to catch up with me, and started to take priority over the things that were actually more important, like getting to work on time or actually doing work at work. It started to take over my relationship. It started to take over the relationship I had with my parents. It started to become more important than everything. And about that time, was when I ended up in my first treatment center, which was not a 12-step treatment center. It was they offered a version of the steps, Steps 1 to 4 condensed, no step 5, a little bit of 6 and 7, and then 12. And that was it. This is available to you in various places throughout Durban, should you choose to go, but we're going to rather focus on building bird boxes and painting your feelings, which obviously I loved, because I am very self-indulgent, and my feelings are the most important thing, and my thoughts are the most important thing. So needless to say, I didn't get well there. However, a seed kind of was planted, and funnily enough, it was at that treatment center that I met my current sponsor. That was about 10 years ago. So funny how God works. Anyway, I left that treatment center after 28 days. I didn't know at the time, but I wasn't clean. By the time I left, I was on psychotropic medication. I'd actually gone during the course of that 28 days to the psychiatrist the day after my detox was finished, and I said to him, he asked me how I'm doing, and I said, well, I'm actually very anxious still, and don't know if this is too soon. And he just looked at me and he said, okay, right, well then we'll put you on another week. So effectively I was high on Valium for 3 weeks straight, and then came out and I relapsed 2 weeks later, you know. And funnily enough, found myself in the exact same position I was before I went to that treatment center. The same feeling of emptiness, the same lack of drive and motivation, same frustrations from everyone around me. Just a different town, really. It was about at that time that my uncle stepped in and he offered me a job as a project manager for a construction company, and that involved moving up to Howick, which again is a little bit of God working, because later on down the line I would end up going to a halfway house in Howick, but I didn't know that at the time. Anyway, needless to say, I messed that up. Got kind of maybe 4 days of motivation in, and then I started to figure out where all the taverns and bars and crack houses and things were. And yeah, again, just like before, that overtook actually having to go to work and do the responsible things. So what I did after kind of burning out again is I ran away to the bush. I ran away to Kruger National Park, and well, I signed up to study and do a professional field guiding course. So it was a year-long course, and my thinking was that there won't be hardcore street drugs at all of these various bush camps. If anything, there'll be beer and there'll be pot, and that's chilled. I can do that. And it didn't last very long. Anyway, so I moved up, and I share often, it's like I'm a good starter, I'm a bad finisher. I moved up to Kruger, and I truly excelled. I did all of the various modules fairly with, not really having to put much effort in. I even went on to do a lead trails certificate, which comes with a whole different bunch of things responsible. You have to do like a firearm advanced rifle handling course, and you got to do like evacuation techniques, and it was hectic, but I did it. And pretty soon after that I was employed at a lodge up there in Kruger, right on the border of Mozambique. And again, it was like things kind of went well, and then they all started to fall apart. And what happened there was that my drinking again had become more important then. It's like so many things, but this time it was more important than guest safety, and more important than my own safety. and all of these things that were very important. My drinking got in the way of, or got ahead of that. Basically what happened is I had spent the afternoon, or morning to the afternoon, drinking with this bunch of guests from Australia, and we went out for an afternoon game drive, and it was fairly normal routine stuff. And what happened is an elephant attacked the game viewer on that drive, and it was hectic. It came out of nowhere, and it attacked the game viewer, and I had to kind of think really quickly. And fortunately enough, we all kind of got out okay. It was fine. But what no one knew is that I was completely pissed over the limit. I can't even remember flashes of that drive, and that scared me. But what scared me more is that one of the guests had taken a video of this whole thing and had posted it somewhere online, and after they had left, it went viral. It went all over various news stations and channels and things like that. It ended up on the Trevor Noah show, funnily enough. My uncle in the States sent me a video of him watching the TV, and there's the video on the TV, and I thought to myself, shit, if one of those guests mentions what we were all getting up to before that drive, I'm done. I could have serious consequences. So I kind of fabricated this whole story, which tied in with me exiting that job, and I ran away back to Durban, pretending that it was because of COVID and we're about to get locked down and everything. But the truth is I was running away from consequences, basically. Anyway, I got back home, lockdown happened. I don't know what it is about lockdown. It seems like everyone shares about lockdown. Kind of I hear that it increases during lockdown. We couldn't get booze, but for some reason I drank and used the most that I had ever drank and used. It's incredible. Couldn't get cigarettes, couldn't get alcohol, but I was loaded 24/7. Incredible stuff. Anyway, I think that COVID helped bring me to my knees. Eventually, after 2 weeks of holding myself up in my room, I believe God started. I'd had various moments throughout my drinking career and throughout my life where I'd felt extremely lonely and lost, and I would do that thing where you pray. I like to believe I was an atheist, but in those moments when the shit hits the fan, I'm like, okay, cool, we've got a great relationship. You're my best friend. You can help me now. And he never did. But this time he did, I think. And I feel that it was a particular brand of desperation. It was different to the time I went into treatment before. It was different to all the other times where I'd really actually got on my knees and cried out for help. Something had changed. And funnily enough, the next day, I've shared about this before, I had a fight with my mother, and I stormed into her room to be right. Can't even remember what we were arguing about, but I knew I was going to show her how she was wrong and how I was right. And about 8 in the morning, I stormed into her room, and I was going to give her this big speech, and she took one look at me and she said, "You are drunk." And I said, "No, I'm not." At 8 in the morning, pissed as a newt. With that, she kind of leapt up out of her bed, went straight to my room, and she found all of my bottles stashed everywhere, all over the room, in between the mattress and my cupboards and my golf bag, and everywhere. She just looked at me and with this aghast expression, and in that moment I can remember doing something different, because what I would, and I think that's God too, due to that specific brand of desperation, she looked at me, and instead of fighting her and saying, no, listen, Mom, you don't understand. This is 3 months worth of bottles. I'm just lazy and messy. Like, this is what I do. Like, it's 3 months. I didn't do that. I didn't argue with her. I didn't defend myself. I just put my hands up and I said, can I go into treatment? And that day, I think she phoned Angus, and she had all sorts of questions. And that afternoon, I was on my way to treatment, and so this whole real journey began. And I just also want to mention this, right? Before the whole lockdown thing, I had got a call from one of my best friend's parents, and they had phoned me, and him, my best friend Cameron, had phoned and was trying to get me around for dinner with his parents for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And I kept pushing it off. And then eventually he became quite insistent, and he said, I really need you to come over for dinner. We need to talk. My parents and myself need to talk to you. And I thought, it's an intervention. It's got to be. It's got to be an intervention. They know me better than anyone. I've grown up in their house. And as it turned out, they wanted advice on how to help their younger son. So my friend Cameron's younger brother, who was currently in treatment somewhere. I didn't know where. And because I had been to rehab before, and I had tried to go to meetings, and I had also falsely claimed sobriety for a while. I let all of my friends believe that I was clean and sober and doing very well. Meanwhile, I'm doing God knows what sort of stuff, right? They wanted me to tell them what I did, and I went to their house with a 6-pack of Heineken Zeros, which have still got alcohol in them, by the way. So do Miller Zeros, so do Castle Zeros. And I proceeded to sit at their bar in their house and tell them that he needs to do a 90 and 90, you get a sponsor, you got to work the steps, go to meetings, tough love. And all the while I'm pouring these Heinekens down the drain, and I'm refilling my glass with beer from his dad's bar, and drinking. Anyway, I ended up leaving that evening, and they were very grateful, and I felt very guilty. And I got home, and I had this moment when I was getting ready to go to bed, where I looked in the mirror, and I had this thought of wouldn't it be amazing if that was real? Wouldn't it be incredible if that was real? If you were really actually clean and sober, and you really knew what the hell you were talking about, and you were able to give those people sound advice from a place of experience. And my heart just swelled, at that thought. And then it shrunk again because I realized how dishonest I'd been. Again, I think that whole situation is God working, because when I ended up going into treatment, that guy was my buddy. That younger brother, my best friend's younger brother, was my buddy. He met me at the door. I tried to give him a hug. He said, no, we can't hug here. Come, going. And funnily enough, more God working. His sponsor was to become my sponsor. That first sponsor, Graham. Incredible stuff like that has continuously happened through my journey in recovery. Amazing, weird coincidences, which aren't coincidences. God moments, right? That guy, he's no longer in the boat, unfortunately, but also that's how things go. Anyway, I want to kind of go through what that first year was like. I've been thinking a lot about this, what each year has meant, okay? And that first year was treatment and was also halfway house, and then there was a little bit of like patient X volunteer vibes up at the house again. But I believe a lot of it was like the bedrock foundation to my recovery. And I've shared about it often. That time for me was largely about just doing what I was told, not having to like everything, but just doing what I was told. That's kind of what got me through that first year. There's a question in the step working guide is like, what evidence do you have of your higher power working in your life today? And this is going to sound very airy-fairy, but it is what it is, and I enjoy it. My answer was ladybugs. Ladybugs are my evidence. Hates it. Can't stand it. Hates it. Can't stand it. Ladybugs are my evidence, and I'll tell you why. Because every time something major in my recovery, especially in that first year, happened, there was a ladybug present. I can't explain that, right? Funnily enough, 10 years prior, when I was going into treatment in that different treatment center, there were ladybugs present there too. Between that first treatment center and the last treatment center, I didn't see one goddamn ladybug. So you put those dots together. You know what I mean? That first treatment center is right around the corner from where my father scattered my grandfather's ashes. In the section of river there in the Drakensberg that is indescribably beautiful. My parents came and took me for a day out, and in that car there was a ladybug on the way to that section of river. We were fishing all afternoon. My father hooked a fish, and I went to go see, and there was a ladybug on the rod. I had a little moment in that river where this bullshit treatment thing, put your worries in a balloon and scatter them to the wind rubbish that doesn't work. But when I did that, there was a ladybug chilling there on the rock. Like, what is that? It's incredible stuff. Or I'm just completely insane. Either way you want to look at it, right? When I went into treatment the second time and did all of the things that are big moments in treatment, like step 5, I was sitting outside where the patients sit at that facility reading through the resentment section, and how it works. And there's a ladybug come land on my page. It's mad. So ladybug there on the porch when I went down to the halfway house. All of these things. And for me, that's God working. Anyway, going back to what that first year meant, yeah, definitely just staying willing, doing what I was told. Getting out of the way, really. The second year, I think, starting to kind of see what the plan would be, right? God wanted me to just, as my first sponsor would say, stop the bleeding. Let's just stop the bleeding. We can talk about future plans later. Let's just stop the bleeding. And year 2 was like seeing where things would go, what the plan was for me, learning a little bit about myself, and learning how to put the program first, I suppose. Because in my first year there was no question of putting the program first. I had to. I was in treatment, I was in a halfway house, I was a volunteer, right? I had no choice. But in the second year it's kind of like little bits of outside stuff started to come in, and I had to learn to put the program first. Like when I would go home and visit my parents for a longer period of time, I had to get to the meetings. It wasn't just like we're all going, get in the car. I had to get to the meetings. My third year, I think, has been taking the training wheels off completely, life really kind of kicked in. A lot had happened towards the end of a lot has happened towards the end of my third year, and now going into my fourth. I was at a meeting maybe a month ago, and Mike was sharing about these curveballs that get thrown at you. And I had lost my aunt 10 days before that, yeah. Funnily enough, the night before my 3rd-year milestone, actually, my mum phoned me and told me that my aunt had killed herself. And, you know, she was one of us. Without a program, she had kind of gotten off what her substance of choice was, which means she drank. And life became too overwhelming for her, and she chose to end it. And that was a hard-hitting kind of reminder. There have been other reminders, you know, too. I had a friend, obviously, 2 friends in a very short space of time be taken by this disease. And yeah, I feel like at the moment it's like life is still here. You know what I mean? Life is still here. The training wheels are off. You have to do what you have to do. Here are all of these reminders of what could possibly happen if you don't. You know. And I don't want to spend too much time on that because it is dark and without hope. But here is the hope. At the same time, as all of these reminders are happening, I've had incredible opportunities arise too. Like I shared at the beginning, yesterday, spending time with my friends, we went out for dinner, and I'm sitting there and we're all like talking and giving each other shit. And I'm thinking to myself, this was just not in my reality 4 or 5 years ago. Like this didn't happen at all. I don't have this close group of friends, you know. I don't have a community of people. I didn't have a community of people. I didn't have purpose in my life. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I was passionate about. I didn't know what I was good at. You know, everything was just kind of haphazard and messy. And today it's like very not haphazard and messy. I've had opportunities to study further. And you know what? I think I'll end with this. Is I've been thinking a lot about this over the last month or so. Is like what it feels like today is I have taken, or the program has enabled me to take ownership of my life. Like I've always had a life, but I wasn't living it. It's like, yes, you were placed on this earth, but there was no like grabbing it and going with it. I feel like I'm living my life today. I feel like what is happening is what was meant to happen always. And the most stark thing is, for me, honestly, I cannot remember what it feels like to be empty, alone, and without direction. And I mention that because that was such a strong feeling for such a long time in my life. It took so much power over my everyday thinking, you know. And with that, like, how do I fix this? What the hell? What's wrong with me? You know? And today I can't actually remember what that feels like. I know what it looked like. You know? I can go back there and describe what it looked like. But I can't remember that feeling anymore. And that's incredible. My ego hates that I ended up in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, because it would love me to be like finding spiritual growth and direction and progress on top of a mountain in Tibet in front of a bunch of monks, but it's not. I find it in these rooms, working this program, wonderful people, and I love that. I really do. So I think I'm going to end it there. Thanks for letting me share.
Thanks, James.